Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective. This is Think Design Stories. In this series, we will be going behind the scenes on one of the most iconic laptop brands ever conceived and is still going strong. Today I am joined by David Hill, who started with IBM in 1985 and was with them until May 2005 when the IBM ThinkPad division was purchased by Lenovo. Since then, David has held several positions between those two companies, including the Executive Director of Design, the Vice President of Corporate Identity and Design, and the Chief Design Officer and Vice President of Experience Design. When it comes to ThinkPads, there are few people that know more than he does. So you have had a pretty expansive career in the world of design with both Lenovo and IBM. And I think what is missed by a lot of people is just how much work initially went into creating the environment where things like ThinkPad could be successful and other design concepts could be successful. And I think there's a bit of an untold story here that a lot of people would probably benefit from knowing, because I think that many individuals just think IBM was always good at design and it just happened and then it continued to happen, and then they sold stuff and it changed hands and that was the end of that. And I know from talking to you over the years that's not necessarily true, and there was a lot of work to be done on the ground to make that successful. And you've alluded to the importance of the design center that was at Raleigh Triangle Park. And I was wondering if you could lay the groundwork first off by what were things like before the design center and all of this was going on? Like, what was the climate like in terms of design?
Sure. So, originally the mission for the PC was in Boca Raton. And in Boca Raton, there was, a development laboratory, the design center, et cetera, and manufacturing. And in the early 90s, IBM moved the manufacturing line for PCs to Raleigh, but they left the development organization, including design, in Boca. And also simultaneously with all this happening, there was a giant movement afoot within IBM to sort of break this up into little IBMs. In fact, some of these business groups were renaming themselves. Like there was a storage organization, they called themselves AdStar. There was the printer organization called themselves Lexmark, and eventually they sold that as a complete business. And in the PC business, they somehow decided to call it the glamorous name of the personal computer company. I don't know. They even put company on it, which I thought was sort of funny. So there was this really big push for autonomy because that was like the buzzword at the time. And so eventually they moved the design and development organization from Boca Raton up to Raleigh. And when they did that, they split up the design center in the spirit of this newfound autonomy. So you had like the home PC group, which was called Aptiva. You had the PC server group. You had the commercial desktop group and the accessories group, and everybody wanted to be their own thing. So they all felt like they had to be able to have, like the design team that supported them worked for them. So in some cases, that was like one guy, because that's how the pie got split up. And when I came here in 1995, it was actually just after Gerstner had taken over as the CEO. And I had met him at IBM in Rochester, Minnesota when I worked there. And he liked what I had done for the IBM AS400. where we turned it all black, and it was super svelte and modern and powerful looking and everything. And anyway, when he came in, he thought that the design of the PCs was lackluster at best, with the exception of ThinkPad. ThinkPad was the shining star. They were selling those things like crazy. And the design was a brilliant design and highly successful, and a lot of innovation in it. But the rest of it, I think one of the business executives referred to it as the rejects from a Russian electronics show. And so that's not a very favorable comment, I guess. And I was in the room when he called it that, oddly enough. But so I decided that, that they offered me this position to come to Raleigh and run design for the PC company, which included these disparate factions. And I was a little reluctant at first because I thought, well, this is pretty deep water. They don't even have a design center anymore. They've got these kind of warring factions, that are not necessarily talking to each other and such. And so I came there, or I agreed to go there, and Gerstner looked at me and said, "I'm sure you'll do a great job." I'm like, okay, well, the gauntlet has been thrown down. He was a brilliant guy, by the way. I really liked him. So when I decided to do this, and I had a lot of people telling me I was crazy, like, well, what are you going to do with your next job, after they get rid of you and all this kind of stuff. And so anyway, I agreed to do this and moved my whole family here from, the frozen tundra of Minnesota to Raleigh, North Carolina, which was kind of a refreshing switch. But when the first day I came to the office, and I had my little instruction sheet or where my office was, like building 205, B207 or whatever it was, I don't remember anymore. I found this office. I opened the door, and inside my office was an upside down trash can with a telephone on it, a metal folding chair, and on the wall was a blackboard with no chalk or eraser. But written on the blackboard by my secretary, who I'd never met, was "Welcome to Raleigh." And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what have I done? And I didn't have a single person that worked for me. I had no direct reports. There was no design organization. There was nothing, except I had been tagged with fixing the design of all the PCs.
How hard could it be?
Right. So when I said to my the secretary at the time, I said, well, how come I don't have any furniture? And then she said, well, didn't you bring it? I said, I didn't bring any furniture from Minnesota. I figured there'd be furniture here. Are you serious? And she said, oh, well, I'll make a phone call. So she disappeared. She came back a little while later while I'm trying to figure out how to arrange my trash can and telephone. And she came back. She said, well, I've got some bad news for you. There is no furniture. There were so many people that moved here from Boca Raton, all the furniture's gone. They had to refit a bunch of the office spaces and all this to accommodate all this. And there isn't really any furniture. I said, well, there's got to be something. Who do you talk to? So I got the phone number of the site architect and called him on the phone. And he immediately said, didn't you bring your own furniture? I said, this is the second time I heard this today. I don't have any furniture. I have nothing. And I said, isn't there like some sort of a warehouse or something where like furniture that nobody wants goes to die, or the broken stuff or something? He said, well, yeah, actually there's this little warehouse over on Davis Drive. I guess you could go over there with me and see what there is. I said, let's go. So I got in my car and drove over there, and there was a kind of a desk like you might see in a library, like a library table. It was decent looking with chrome legs. I said, I'll take that. And then there was a there was a Saarinen tulip table, which is a very famous design. It was kind of beat up over in the corner. I said, "What are you doing with that thing?" He said, "Oh, that thing is going to the crusher." I said, "Not anymore. I want it." And so I got that and had it refurbished at a model maker, so it looked decent. And then he said, I said, "What about chairs?" He said, "Well, there aren't any." I said, "Oh, okay." So I went back to my office and I just walked over to the nearest conference room and found the best condition Eames conference room chair and just stole it and put it in my office, you know, and that was it. and uh, and then uh, I still this wasn't the greatest furniture setup by any stretch of the imagination. So
No.
I called a guy in Armonk and I said, "Hey, my memory, if it's correct, is there used to be a Castelli desk, which was designed by Richard Sapper, that was being tested for possible greater dispersion within IBM because it had wire management and a bunch of stuff like this. And it was designed by Richard Sapper. And I know that Tom Hardy had actually used this desk in his office in Stamford, Connecticut. So I went on the hunt for where is this desk? It's the Castelli 9 to 5
Mhm.
furniture grouping. And so I called this guy and he said, "Oh, yeah, we have it." I said, "Well, where is it?" He said, "It's in a warehouse. It's on a pallet wrapped up in plastic. You want it?" I said, "Yeah, I want it." So he said, "Okay, I'll wrap it up." And he said, "Do you need any like guest chairs?" He said, "We got a whole bunch of these Eames aluminum group like visitors chairs. They don't have arms or wheels. They're just kind of cool looking." I said, "I'll take two of them." So he made a whole care package and sent this stuff to me. And so then that for my whole career in Raleigh, I used this Castelli desk designed by Sapper. And it was people would always come in and say, "Where did you get that desk?" Because it's incredible looking. I still have it. When I retired, I took it home with me.
It is a beautiful piece of furniture.
Yes, it is. So, that's kind of the backstory of when I came here. There was nothing. There was no design center. The designers were sprinkled about. They occasionally saw each other in the cafeteria. Maybe that somebody be working on a monitor and they pick up the phone and say, "Hey, are you guys working on a monitor?" "Yeah, we're working on what size is it?" "Oh, it's a 14. Oh, we need a 17. What's it look like?" "We don't know yet." And it's like, this is crazy. We needed to, in my opinion, we needed to design a complete system for the way all of the PCs looked. So the pieces were interchangeable. You could share tooling, all of these kinds of things, and resource.
Mhm.
So I made a play to integrate the design center, which was not easy because once people have this kind of autonomy and power, they don't like to give it away. It's very rare to go into an executive's office and talk him out of headcount and mission. Almost impossible. But over time, I was able to convince people that this was a good idea. And it really took the group executive at the time, uh, who Bob Stevenson was his name. And we had had on the big showdown with all the new designs and everything. And he loved it. And he said, "Well, this is a pretty good case for why we should do this. Because in the other management system, it all looked like that. And now it looks like this." And there was a lot of unrest as to, well, is this all feasible? Is this just an idea? And I said, "Oh, I'm convinced we can make this." And Stevenson looked at me and said, "Can you make this?" I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Okay." And then he looked at I don't remember who it was in the room, but he told them that to move the people and the dollars. And it was done. And, and I'm standing up there in the front of the room, I can't hardly believe this is happening. And I started to talk more about this. And my manager was at the back of the room. He was the VP of marketing for the whole PC business. And he's like doing this, like, he wanted me to shut up and sit down. You already sold it. And afterwards, he came up to me and he said, "Rule number one, once you've sold it, shut up and sit down." Okay. It was a great lesson, a very good lesson. But the whole project was that we created this work was called PC Next. It's a name that I created. And we worked on the design of all the system units, the keyboards, mice, speakers, monitors, everything you could possibly imagine, the packaging, user interface for consumer. There's a lot of user interface interest in consumer at the time, with proprietary kinds of user interfaces to help people who didn't know how to use computers use computers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the famous one would be Bob, probably the dumbest user interface ever made.
Yeah.
But we certainly did not make a Bob. But it was a huge, huge project. It took months of work, but it was successful, and we, redid basically everything. But doing it without having the resource that actually works for you was made it even more difficult. I had to be the big negotiate like everything with everybody. It's like I would have meetings with these four different group, executives who were the general managers, and
Mm-hmm.
try to get them all to agree on one design. It was like, wow, very difficult. You can
Mm-hmm.
imagine. And of course, consumer was like, well, we don't want our PCs to look like the commercial PCs. And my comment was, is that because you just branding wise, you don't want them to look the same, or you're afraid they're going to not look consumer enough? And he said, well, we're afraid they're just going to look like equipment from the back room somewhere. I said, okay, well, what if they all look like consumer products? He said, then I don't care.
Okay.
Okay, well, then we'll consumerize these, whatever that means. Basically meant make them look more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's the kind of thing that you would run into. In other groups, like the server business, the PC server, they actually had more unique hardware
Mm-hmm.
because the chassis were different and such. So they were easier to deal with. And we've totally redesigned all that stuff. So it was rackable.
Right.
They didn't have anything that went to rack at the time. And I knew a lot about rack stuff coming from the AS400 world. So I was their patron saint of rackness. I knew how to do it.
That's not a title that you hear very often.
No, it's not, but I know a lot about it. It's kind of scary.
Yeah. I think it's really important for like the people that are watching this just to understand like how significant having moving from a model where kind of each one of these products or even product lines has their own individual designer to consolidating all of the talent and the experience in a centralized place and what that does because you in your little company that you've created for yourself you might not necessarily you'll have your own dedicated designer but you may not necessarily have the best designer in IBM for your
Right,
project in that
right.
moment.
Or you may not have enough,
Mm,
because the other thing that I discovered, and it was one of the arguments that I had, is if you have, let's just say you're the guy in charge of commercial desktop, and you have one designer, and
mm,
maybe that's okay in 1995, but you're planning on redesigning the entire product line in 1996. It's not just a refresh, it's a whole new product line, and there's going to be 7 new chassis. Oops. Well, maybe at the same time in the server group, they're not making anything new, but
mhm,
that designer can't work on that stuff because he doesn't work for them. So it's like
mm,
you can't do any resource sharing. Whereas if all the designers work for me, I can do the resource balancing and figure out, hey, we got to have 3 people on this thing for a week. So everybody put that on the back burner and we'll work on this thing, and we won't let the schedule slip on the other, but we'll just put a big, a big push on this. And there was no ability to do that
Hmm.
without that kind of a model, unless you want to go external and hire some design company and spend a bunch of money
Hmm.
and then get a whole bunch of useless designs back that don't respect functionality or how you're going to make it, or they just make up whatever they feel like doing, or it looks, gee, that looks sort of like one of those Packard bells. Oh yeah, well, we designed those last month. Oh, okay, well, that explains it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of weird stuff with that.
Yeah, you don't want any external Kalasushi getting all over
No,
your sleek black
no,
machines.
no. There was way too much of that going on, and these firms would charge a very, very large sum to create like the design language for a whole new product line. I mean, I'm talking, figures in the millions.
Hmm.
I'm like, really? We can do it ourselves. I just need to have all the resource. But and another big part of that, just not only the resource balancing and all of that, is I wanted to make big changes in terms of the color of these products. For years, from the original PC, they were this kind of beige, putty gray kind of color. And I thought it was kind of sleepy. And so if you wanted to make PCs that look powerful and high technology and maybe go in your home, you look around and say, well, what do electronics look like in your home? Well, you know what? A lot of them are black in 1995. Your television was basically black. The stereo was
Yeah.
black. Maybe the phone was black. A lot of black stuff. And in black we had a lot of success with black in the AS400 group because it changed all the mid-range computers to black. And ThinkPad was black.
Hmm. Hmm.
But of course, there were a lot of arguments about, oh, black is the color of death, or it's sinister. Okay, every one of those arguments you can make up, I can make another one. It's the color of sexy.
Hmm.
It's you can, as many arguments as you have negative, you can come up with positive.
Hmm.
It doesn't show dirt. You can use recycled plastic easier. They look smaller. It goes on and on and on. But and so it was a big push on that. And then a lot of the DIN standards things, you've heard this
Right.
argument before
Yep.
with the coloration of computers in the workplace. But eventually, when this new design language came out, pretty much everything was still beige. The
Hmm.
exception of the servers were black, and there were a special model or two of Aptiva that was black. And then eventually everything turned black because the cost police got involved and found out that it cost a whole lot more money to make two 17-inch monitors, one that was black and one that was white. So, of course, the consumer guys were like, well, we're not making white computers. So it was like, okay, well, who has the highest volumes? And it eventually, we were able to turn everything pretty much black
Yep.
because it looked better and it was cheaper.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, like I was kind of surprised, but I guess it makes sense. Like your comment that if you're reusing or recycling plastic, if it's black, it's easier to work with.
Absolutely. Right. And this isn't a new thing. I mean, like some of the commercial desktops for many years at IBM were using recycled materials, including water bottles and things like that. ThinkPads have had recycled materials in them for many, many years. And black is the best color to do that with. But that's just sort of a side light.
Yeah.
But like I said, everything was redesigned all simultaneously, and it wasn't really a super big team. There was a designer from Scotland, and I had the design team in Japan created some conceptual work for me, and then there was a handful of designers in Raleigh who were pulled around, And I just put them all in a room, and we had workshops for, a week on end, like pinning up huge drawings of monitors. So today is monitor day. Let's see what everybody has for monitors and keyboards and mice, speakers, everything. It was a big job. I burned a lot of airplane fuel.